All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is election night. Thank you to everyone who's currently tuning in right now. Thank you for being here. Tonight, it's election night, one of the last few important elections before the all important midterms. That's right. In Ohio, we have a special election for the House of Representatives, which towards the very end appears to be a barn burner. The race appears to be neck and neck. If the Dems win this seat, this is a huge shocker. It'll send shock waves and a sign for how the midterms will possibly play out. Even if they lose by a close percentage, it'll be by a percentage that they should not have gotten close to. But that's not the only race that we're going to be watching tonight. We're going to be watching count them, three states which are holding primaries tonight in Missouri, Michigan, and Kansas. Very important races in Michigan and Kansas specifically. We're gonna be seeing if the political machine Emily's List will crash and burn tonight. Almost a few weeks after almost losing their endorsed candidates in Georgia in very close elections. Tonight, we'll be seeing if the progressives can upset Emily's List in Michigan, the Michigan Democratic gubernatorial primary, where Gretchen Whitmer, the Emily's endorsed candidate, the apparent frontrunner, is hoping to be upset by Abdul El Sayed, who's from the progressive wing, the Bernie progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Also in Kansas's third congressional district, we have Brent Welder, also endorsed by the progressive wing, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, who the front runner again, Brent Welder, who's hoping to pull through tonight. After being challenged by another Emily's List candidate, Sharice Davids, in what is appeared to be a bitterly contested primary. Those, along with the Ohio special election, are going to be some of the most watched races we're going to be paying attention to tonight. But we also will be looking at the Kansas 4th Congressional District, where the incumbent, Ron Estes, is running against another Republican named Ron Estes. The incumbent, Ron Estes, caused a little controversy when uh, he petitioned to have the term representative placed in front of his name on the ballot, signifying that he is the incumbent, which has drawn many negative signs from other Republicans as well as other voters in the state of Kansas, giving as they see it as being an unfair advantage towards the incumbent. So that's a race where the incumbent is most likely to win, but we'll see because of that name mix-up. We'll also be paying attention to the gubernatorial GOP primary in Kansas, where the incumbent, Jeff Coyler, is facing a challenge from Chris Kobach, the Secretary of State, endorsed by Donald Trump, where both sides of the Republican Party have many mixed results and opinions on that race. Um, so those are some of the races we're going to be paying attention to. Again, the polls in about 46 minutes will close in Ohio for that congressional district, and hopefully once we get results in that, hopefully we'll get them to you real fast. Uh, as you may have noticed tonight, I am joined by my good friend Ethan from Let's Talk Elections. Ethan, would you care to say anything to the audience?
Yeah, so we're going to be live streaming and just pretty much covering a number of things that are happening tonight. So it should be very interesting to say the least, especially with a number of close races on both political sides, and whether it be the Republicans or the Democrats. So very fun night to say, you know, I guess. Yeah.
Now I have to ask you, what are the races that you yourself are going to be paying attention to? Because there are a lot of races tonight, some of them with greater consequences than others. Like I said, mostly the main focus tonight will be that special election in Ohio, as well as the primaries on the Democratic side in Kansas and Michigan. But what are some of the races that you're going to be paying attention to?
Well, like you said, the Ohio race is going to be very interesting. It's going to set the tone for the 2018 midterms, considering it's the last special election that will have national implications in the House of Representatives. And then, of course, looking over to Kansas, I've mentioned this before. The Kansas 4th election was the first special election I ever watched. So that one I will also be covering on my own live stream. And it would be very interesting to see a rematch between James Thompson and Ron Estes, of course, the incumbent one. And then in Missouri, not much to see there except for the GOP side in the Senate race between Austin Peterson and Josh Hawley. Probably, GOP back candidate versus libertarian type, new type of Republican, not Democrat. I meant to say Republican before, but not focusing much in Michigan. I expect similar results to what we saw in 2016 with progressive candidates doing pretty well. I'm not so sure about a victory. That's something we should cover. But also, I know there's a primary occurring in Washington, but obviously nothing too contested there. But mainly focusing on Kansas, the Missouri GOP primary in the Senate election, and of course the Ohio 12th district.
As you mentioned, for the night, we won't be covering Washington, those primaries, because there are actually a couple of interesting primaries that could be interesting because Washington, as just like California, they have a top two primary. But the reason why, at least I won't be covering those races, because the way my setup works, I don't have an easy way to manage the top two. So I wouldn't have an easy way. I don't have an easy way to broadcast those results. So if there was a way, I would be covering the Washington primaries. But but aside from that, those are mostly the races I'm going to be paying attention to. Now, Ethan, I have to ask you. The overall sense is that Democrats are likely to retake the House of Representatives. The Senate, on the other hand, is a little mixed bag. I see your videos, and one of the your calls on some of the Senate races that I find interesting is Florida specifically. I believe in your most recent ones you gave North Dakota and Indiana to the GOP, but you also gave Florida. I'm very curious on that because my opinion on that race is I rate that as a likely Democratic hold due to the fact that Bill Nelson, for the most part, is likely going to be hammering Scott on the gun control issue. And even though he did sign some gun control legislation, they were very weak sauce compared to what they could have done. And even at the CNN town hall that was broadcast after the shooting, Nelson had already started criticizing Rick Scott from the get-go. It's also due to the fact that Rick Scott, while he was reelected twice, he was elected to the governorship by very close margins in Republican wave years. So some may view that as, hey, this guy won very close races. He can pull it out. However, the national environment was a wave for the Republican Party in 2010 and 2014. And if he only won those races in big wave years for Republicans by close margins, how is he expected to win in a year where it's expected to be a big Democratic wave year, especially in Florida with those issues, as well as the influx of Puerto Ricans, which is going the Puerto Ricans that have moved to Florida because of the hurricanes. From what I can tell, Puerto Ricans appear to tend to lean a little bit more towards the Republican side. Their statewide elected resident commissioner, her party is affiliated with the Republican Party, so Puerto Ricans, to a certain extent, might tend to lean towards the Republican Party. But we'll see. We'll see how that plays into a factor. So I just want to get your reasons of why you think Nelson is likely to lose.
Well, first of all, we're going into an area where both candidates are very popular. Bill Nelson, positive 8% approval rating. Rick Scott at, I believe, positive 18%. I believe the last poll was taken by the Morning Consult. But also, when it comes down to it, Puerto Rican voters, this argument actually benefits the Democrats more than the Republicans because Puerto Rican voters, sure, they tend to, lean a little bit more to the right, but that doesn't mean that they are completely right wing. I bet, if they did become a state, that would be Democratic territory. It wouldn't be a Republican stronghold at all. That Puerto Rican voters typically, yes, they are a little bit more right wing than some other type of Hispanic voters across the country or Latino voters. But Puerto Rican voters are they're still Democrats, to be very frank with that. So that's something that would be very beneficial to the Democrats. But typically, number one, they don't come out and vote. Yes, they are, new waves of voters. But if they don't come out and vote, it won't really help much. And also, Rick Scott, again, with that approval rating thing, the same argument can be made for Bill Nelson, but Rick Scott at this point in time has a higher approval rating. He's approved by more Florida voters. Yes, governing is different than legislating in terms of the United States Senate, but Rick Scott right now, actually, Bill Nelson, in my most recent prediction on August 1st, I had a Bill Nelson victory only because I did see your argument. Your argument with Rick Scott underperforming in election years such as this, and he is narrowly leading in opinion polls. Before my argument behind Rick Scott victory, again, leading in opinion polls, the approval rating thing, and also I don't see Rick Scott doing as worse as other GOP candidates would with Puerto Rican voters. When Puerto Rican voters came in, huge numbers into the country, the first thing that they likely saw when they came to Florida, there were many pictures of this, and it said, Governor Rick Scott welcomes you. If that's not one of the first things you see, then I mean, that's something that would be really beneficial to this campaign, even though that wasn't really talked about a lot. Just think about it, coming in from a country where you have pretty much lost everything. And then you see, regardless of the political party, you see that the governor of the state that you're coming to says, oh, welcome to our state. And then you get a lot of help from what would seem like coming from the governor, but really comes from the state itself. And I really think with Puerto Rican immigrants coming in, now I would say Bill Nelson could narrowly edge it out. But back then, the argument with Rick Scott being very popular and probably doing better with Puerto Rican voters than other Republicans could expect, such as Donald Trump or even Mitt Romney, other type of GOP candidates, they're not going to do as well as Rick Scott would. And mainly because, again, Rick Scott's the governor. He is going to have a very, very, very good appeal to them compared to someone coming from either Massachusetts, New York, coming down to Florida and say, I'm your candidate. This man is known statewide. He was probably one of the first names that these Puerto Rican immigrants knew. And again, I think that'll all help him in his campaign. But like I said, I do think Bill Nelson can narrowly edge it out at this point in time, just given a whole new set of circumstances that benefit the Democrats, not just in Florida, but nationwide. They've inched up in like the national poll, and a couple of other things aren't really the best standing for the GOP, especially with Donald Trump and a couple of other Trump aides getting in trouble with the law. And that's not the only thing that would be focused on. The economy is really what Trump wants to focus on. I really see him coming down to Florida because he said in the last 60 days he'll be campaigning 6 to 7 days a week. I do expect that. I do expect Florida to be a main target because Democrats can win in Montana or West Virginia, but if they lose Florida, it takes one away from them, and they are 1 to 2 seats away, either from a majority or losing seats. So Florida, very important.
Very interesting, very interesting. One of the things about Bill Nelson is that in the year 2000, he was one of the Democratic gains. He had actually won the state of Florida, I think by a comfortable margin. At the same time as, of course, the whole Bush v. Gore incident. It's actually a fact that had they done the recount, Gore actually would have won Florida. I mean, this is not disputed. There are actual reports that said if the recount did happen, Gore won Florida and therefore won the presidency. But aside from that, even the presidential election at that level was close, regardless of who you think would have who actually won the state. But Nelson, I believe, had been reelected by a decent margin. So that's one of the things that's interesting about Bill Nelson. And there's this whole talking point of Democrats don't turn out midterm years. From what I can tell, I don't see any other argument for that other than the fact that look at 2010 and 2014 Democrats don't turn out well midterm years or midterm years when that is very misleading. Yes, Democrats did not turn out as well in 2010 and 2014. But one thing that people always fail to mention when it comes to that is the midterm curse. The midterm curse, for those who don't know, basically the president's party, the president's party that is in power in the White House, tends to lose seat in midterm election years because there's this whole feeling of complacency. Okay, my guys won. I did my job. I think we're gonna be fine. And that party's voters get complacent, and of course there are a few exceptions to that. In the year 2002, in the Senate races, that was Republicans won back control of the Senate. The only midterm year when a sitting president's party gained a chamber. But that could be chalked up due to 9/11. 9/11 happened. There was this feeling we got to get around the president, the party, and they actually gained seats in the Senate and the House in that year. And there was also in 1998, of course, ironically, the Bill Clinton impeachment scandal hurt the Republicans, and the Democrats broke even in the Senate and gained 5 seats in the House. So of course those are the few exceptions where in most cases the party in power is usually tend to lose seats. So the whole talking point of Democrats don't turn on midterm election years is true, but the way I can hear it, but the way I hear it is that is they make it seem like in general in midterm years Democrats don't turn out well.
Well, yeah. Also, the argument, with not just necessarily midterm elections, but people like to compare the 2016 results to what Obama did, and factors were completely different. Also, in midterm elections, of course, Democrats aren't going to turn out in Republican wave years. These are times where the Republican Party this has been called a Republican wave year because the Republican Party has done so well. So there is really no argument saying that there's no valid argument saying that Democrats don't typically turn out in midterm years, other than previous history where Republicans may have turned out by a lesser margin. Yes, the Republican Party does much better in turnout in some elections. So they have much better organization. To be frank about it, when we come down to state local elections, the Republican Party is always the first to get on that and get their voters out. Which is why a number of these Democratic states that were Democratic states, and maybe in 2012 could have flipped in 2016, but still those Democratic states sometimes have Republican majorities in the state Senate, state House of Representatives, and it's not because the state is necessarily a Republican state.
Well, that's
Because
also you could also chalk that up to gerrymandering at the state level.
well, yeah, exactly. But the Republican Party also, even without gerrymandering, to be honest, I do see the Republican Party edging out the Democrats in terms of statewide elections. The Democratic Party has always underperformed in those. They always get their voters out, like they do in presidential elections 2008, but that Obama coalition did not come out in 2010. But then they came out in 2012, didn't come out in 2014.
Because that was a presidential election year.
Right. Yeah. The Democrats do better in presidential election years stereotypically, and it's also true. But also in a Democratic wave year, you can't really expect Democrats not to turn out.
Well, yeah, but like what you just said is that Democrats tend to turn out well in presidential election years, but that's also that is true. But that talking point makes it sound like that they only do that, when in reality, it's because their president is in power. In 2006, that was a big wave year for the Democrats. Midterm election year, they turned out well because of the midterm curse. You look at other past elections. Midterm years where Democrats came out to vote. So what people, at least in my opinion, I feel is misleading when they say Democrats don't turn out in midterm election years. It's true, but don't make it sound like it applies to all midterms, because again, you need to factor in the midterm curse and how it's just, for the most part, you could say it's a fact that yes, always expect, if you're the party in power, always expect your party to lose seats. Never you have Republicans like Newt Gingrich thinking that the Republicans are going to pick up many seats in the Senate. Newt Gingrich, by the way, is the same guy who lost 5 seats in the 6-year itch, which is the worst midterm for a 2-term president. So Newt Gingrich, who's saying, "Oh, Republicans are going to pick up 5-6 seats, 5-6 seats," when this is the same guy who lost seats in a midterm year. But going off that, I'm interested in more of your reasoning of why you give Indiana to the Republicans, when for the most part in these midterm election years, it's more about turnout, who can turn out the vote, and I'll actually get into North Dakota after Indiana because I'm interested to hear what your reasoning is in Indiana for giving it to the Republican.
Well, first of all, there's been very, very little polling done out of the state of Indiana, so we don't have necessarily the most information. I'm actually going to pull up the Indiana Senate race on my computer here, but I believe the only 2 polls that were taken both show Mike Braun leading, and one of them is done by SurveyMonkey, so I don't trust it too well. However, Mike Braun is at a point where he is a businessman outsider type candidate. He was a state representative before, but he beat 2 United States representatives in the Republican primary, and it was by a margin of larger than 10%. So I'm seeing exactly what we saw with Donald Trump in the state of Indiana before. We had Senator Ted Cruz.
Well, you also had Mike Pence, or are you talking about the Republican primary or the general?
The Republican primary.
Okay.
Yeah, because Mike Pence did endorse, technically endorse. It was kind of just like
because I was gonna say Trump carried it in the general by a big margin because he had Mike Pence on the ticket. In the Republican primary, that's different.
Yeah, but what we saw with Donald Trump in the primary, he defeated, U.S. politicians in the primary, and then he went on to the general. Yes, he had Mike Pence, but also when it comes down to, I see Mike Braun as a Trump-type candidate. I really think that, number one, Mike Pence is going to focus on Indiana a lot, because if
hold on, I'm sorry to interrupt you. For those of the people in the chat who think they hear owl sounds, I should have mentioned this off the bat, but I currently have a condition called Tourette's because I have ADHD. Tourette's basically causes me to make movements or certain sounds because it makes because my brain says you do that, it sounds good. So if I like woo like that sound, that's because that's a tick I have from my Tourette. So I apologize if that gets annoying. I try to keep it down as much as I can, but that's that owl sound you guys apparently are hearing. So I apologize for that. But Ethan, continue.
Okay, yeah. So again, it would seem really bad, even though we do have a Democratic incumbent in this state, Indiana going blue in a midterm election year where we have a vice president from the state of Indiana. It'll seem like, they're losing ground in area that they had before, even though there is a Democratic incumbent. When you see Indiana blue, yet somehow this state went overwhelmingly for the president in 2016, it looks really bad. It would also look bad in states like North Dakota or Montana, but Indiana would strike like right to the heart for Donald Trump and Mike Pence. And there's been a lot of attention on the Indiana Senate race, not in terms of polling, because people actually have been neglecting it in polling for whatever reason, but every single, ranking is considering this race as a toss-up. Every single one, from Cook down to Real Clear Politics, there's not a single lean Republican or lean blue race. And this race before was characterized as lean blue, so it's been drawing a little bit more to the right. Mike Braun is that one type of candidate that I see having a great shot at winning. Luke Messer before, I did not see winning, and Todd Rokita, I didn't know much about. But Mike Braun is a candidate that, frankly, really should scare Democrats in the Senate race because he is a near exact replica of what Donald Trump did in this state. He came in leading behind in polls originally, like Donald Trump was in the Indiana Republican primary in 2016, actually. Ted Cruz led by 34%. And then leading up into the primaries, Donald Trump started leading in opinion polls, and that's exactly what we saw in Mike Braun. So I'm seeing certain signs that gave us an indication of a Trump victory in Indiana in 2016. The circumstances sure were different, and there is a Democratic incumbent in the state of Indiana. But right now, Indiana, I am comfortable enough putting the state in the leaning Republican column for this point in time. Things can change. Things do change a lot. But right now, with current polling data and the current approval of Joe Donnelly, it seems like Mike Braun is going to narrowly edge the state out.
That's very interesting because I currently have Indiana as tilt Democrat just due to the fact that there is a little polling, and because mostly in midterm election years it's all about turnout. I don't have this with me right now, but if you look at the Indiana presidential elections in 2016 as well as the Senate race, using the Baugh race as a comparative, Evan Baugh got about 1.1 million voters. If we look back in 2010, I believe Dan Coates, when he took that seat when Baugh had retired, he got about 900,000 votes. So in terms of turnout, it can be done. Democrats, I feel like, because this is a wave election year, because Joe Donnelly, similar to Evan Baugh, does have this coalition of Democrats, and even probably has some moderate Republican appeal. If we look at Hillary Clinton by herself in that presidential election, she got about 1 million votes. If Donnelly can channel a good majority of that, even maybe get turn out a bunch of Democrats from who would vote for Clinton for that presidential election, because that's 1 million votes. And if we expect the Republicans to underperform in turnout, I think it's fair to say that at the very least it's a toss-up and no party to certain extent has a clear advantage, because again it is about turnout, and I believe neither party in either 2014 or 2010 in Indiana got over 1 million votes. I believe Republicans maxed out at 900,000 votes. So I think Donnelly can turn out enough of the Democratic base, as well as peel off moderate Republican support in the Indiana race. The North Dakota race is a little different because Donnelly by himself, if it is a huge wave election year, can win Indiana with just the Democrats who turned out that voted for Hillary Clinton, as well as the Democrats that voted for Evan Baugh. Heikep, on the other hand, even if she turned out all the Democrats that voted in 2016, that's about 90K. That's not enough to overtake the Republicans. They would have to underperform. One of the reasons I think Heikep is in a better position than most people think is because we look at 2012. There was another race that was very similar to Heikep's race. In 2012, presidential election year, high Republican turnout, North Dakota, and Nebraska. Ben Nelson, very conservative Democrat, retired. Uh, in a deep red state up in a presidential election year. Bob Kerrey, former senator, who had not been in the public light for about 12 years, decided to run in hopes to hold that seat. He lost to Deb Fischer in one of the only Republican Senate games in 2012. So we had a Democratic retirement in a red state in a presidential election year, big Republican turnout. The candidate was a former statewide elected Democrat who had been out of the spotlight for 12 years, and he lost. North Dakota is the same thing. Ken Conrad, a long-serving Democratic senator in a deep red state up in a presidential election year, retired. Heidi Heitkamp, former North Dakota Attorney General, who was last seen losing in the year 2000 in the governor's election. She had not been in the public spotlight for a good 12 years, similar to Bob Kerrey. Heitkamp pulled off a major upset by winning by a very close margin in a presidential election year. That seat should have been an easy Republican pickup. It should have been Nebraska because those races, very same situations. And while they kept Nebraska, they lost North Dakota, a state that they should have won in a presidential election year. So we look at that, and that was because she had put together a big coalition of Republican support. Now, because of that, I would give her a little bit of an edge this year because it is a big Democratic wave year. But it all depends on if she can turn out her coalition or put it back together, and that is yet to be seen. The tariffs are a big sign of what we could see for things to come, but that's one of the reasons why North Dakota seems a little bit different. But you can make the argument of why Heitkamp will lose, but you can also make the other argument of why she may be stronger in this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, North Dakota, very, very interesting. Heitkamp right now is at a disadvantage, having Kevin Cramer on the Republican side.
Keep in mind, she also defeated a sitting representative in 2012. And that's another thing. She was going up against another statewide elected Republican, so that's even more so than Bob Kerrey's race. Then she defeated a statewide elected Republican representative. So that's another thing. You can compare this to this year, where she's also running against a statewide elected congressional Republican.
Yeah, it did get very, very close. She won by less than 1%, but she also was very lucky in 2012, riding off of, Barack Obama. This is not a presidential election year, but North Dakota is not a Democratic state, so Democrats are not expected to come out and vote in presidential election years like they would in a state like Michigan or Wisconsin.
Like in 2012, which was also a presidential election year, but she had still won, despite Nebraska being in very same situations and setups, but yet she won.
Yeah. Well, when we go into 2018, Kevin Cramer is also, of course, a sitting representative. I wonder what happened to the other guy, but
he probably became a lobbyist somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't go back for the representative seat, but Kevin Cramer has consistently led in opinion polls. Let me go back to 2012. For the case for Heidi Heitkamp, well, the last poll taken right before the election showed Rick Berger had 51% to 44%.
And she'd also only been leading in 3 out of, like, I think 9 polls, was it?
I think 9.
There were 9 polls, and she only led in 3.
Oh yeah, 10 actually. Yeah, 10 polls. Yeah, but still, that makes it even better for her case. But when we're going into 2018, her approval rating is not too high either. She went into 2012 as one of those not really unknown candidates because she wasn't really unknown, but she wasn't as known as a representative would be.
But, like, she was the former statewide elected attorney general, like Bob Kerrey, who was the former statewide elected Nebraska senator, who retired in 2000 when he was succeeded by Ben Nelson. So,
yeah, Ben Nelson won by a lot in 2006. I think
because he's a very conservative Democrat. He
voted for Obamacare, right?
Only after many concessions that they should not have made to him.
Okay. Yeah, did they need his vote?
Yes, they needed all 60 votes.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But okay. so I didn't really shed a tear when Ben Nelson left because I'm glad he's not here anymore.
Oh yeah. Okay, so right before we go into this, I'm actually gonna start my live stream now because I was supposed to start at 7, and I didn't realize the time was 7:09. So
All right. Speaking of that, if you all notice on your screen, we have about 20 minutes until the polls close in Ohio. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it when we get those first results. All right. We have about 11 minutes and 34 seconds until the polls close in Ohio. Again, thank you everyone who is currently tuning in. We'll get to, hopefully, we'll get some results immediately and very quickly. But so yeah, in about 11 minutes, the polls will close, and hopefully we'll get some results. So stay tuned. Um, I actually want to talk about the Michigan governor's gubernatorial Democratic primary. As of course, as we mentioned earlier, the Democrats are fighting it out, the progressive wing, and the versus the more so establishment wing. As you currently see here, this is a map of the 2016 primary between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Now, again, the gubernatorial primary tonight is a three-way race. This is mostly a two-person race, but I want to give you some of the counties that we should be looking out for once we get results from that state. One of the counties to look out for tonight is, if I can find it on here, one of the counties that we should be paying attention to tonight is, come on, if I can find it. Well, first of all, the first county we should be looking at is Kent County. This is where Bernie Sanders performed heavily well in the primary. If Abdul El Sayed wants to have any chance at clinching this nomination, he wants to run it up and be in first place in Kent County. He wants to have a huge margin over Gretchen Whitmire in Kent County if he wants to have any chance at winning. Ingham County. This is another county Bernie Sanders had won in the primary when he again upset Hillary Clinton. Ingham County is where a lot of college young voters are located. Also happens to be Gretchen Whitmire's home county. So if Abdul El Sayed is winning this county by decent margin and she's losing her home county, that's a devastating sign for her. That's a devastating sign for Whitmire. But again, these are some of the counties. Of course, once we get close to those polls closing in Michigan, I'll be sure to come back here and check those out. But again, in about 9 minutes, the polls will close in Ohio. So stay tuned. I'll get you hopefully results once those polls close as fast as I can. Okay, so we have about, as you can see on your screen, about 3 minutes until the polls close in Ohio's 12th congressional district. This is going to be a very significant and important race. Um, like we discussed earlier, which will give us a sign of what we can expect for the midterms. This is the last general election, or I'm sorry, this is the last big congressional special election and election of significance aside from the primaries until those November elections. Joining back with me is Ethan from Let's Talk Elections. So, Ethan, do you have any final predictions or expectations in terms of the counties we should be seeing filling in?
Well, first of all, I do think that they're going to update, especially with the early voting coming in right away. So as soon as they start announcing the results, not necessarily just on CNN, but on the New York Times even, the early vote is going to be something we need to look at because 46% of early voters were Democrats, 16% of them were independents, and that was updated on August 4th. So the numbers could have changed, and 36% were Republicans. So we should be seeing numbers based off how Republican of a district this is that should be around 50-50. We should be seeing O'Connor possibly he could get more than 4% of the independent vote, but Troy Balderson should start off doing pretty well considering that that early vote did have a considerable number of ballots. Over 20,000 ballots were cast early on, and 13,000 Democrats, like I said before, with 16% independent voters. So they're probably going to lean a little bit more to the right, only because these states, I mean, this district itself has been Republican for so long, and many independents in Republican districts always lean conservative, obviously, but they are independents nonetheless, so they still seem like they could have a possibility of going to the Democrats. Right now, O'Connor, if every Democrat votes for Danny O'Connor, he only needs 4% to make it a 50-50 tie right as numbers drop. So if we don't see that and we just see O'Connor starting off with 46%, which is the number of Democrats that came out and voted, that doesn't look too good for his campaign because it means that he didn't gain any independent voters, or he only gained 1 to 2% and lost some Democratic voters. But I do think that Danny O'Connor will likely take an early lead. But at the end of the night, like I said yesterday, Troy Balderson could likely end up being the next representative from the Ohio 12th district.
And that is of itself. Expect the early vote to heavily favor the Democrats going in. But with 10 seconds until those polls close in Ohio, this is going to be a big night. We're going to see what happens. But as of right now, it is 7:30 on the East Coast, and here are the first projections of the night. In the Ohio House Congressional District 12, it is too early to call. Danny O'Connor, you see right there, the Democrat, going up against Troy Balderson, the Republican. This is going to be a barn burner that we expect it to be a barn burner. What this means is that too early to call. We don't have enough significant election data to make any sort of calculation. Other than that, it's too early to call. We also do not have any vote results. Alrighty, apparently we have our first results at this point in time.
Whoa.
In Ohio's House Congressional District 12, Daniel O'Connor, the Democrat, is currently leading at this moment, going up against Troy Balderson. Now, you take this with a grain of caution. This is very, very early vote. It was expected that the early vote would heavily favor the Democrats. So again, you see that 0% reporting. Just don't draw too many conclusions from this. This is what we have so far in terms of results. Again, this is very early. This is expected to be very close, but again, as of right now, too early to call Daniel O'Connor currently in the lead.
Yep, that's interesting. Let me go ahead and check Franklin County. So this is not the entire Franklin County, it's just a part of it, but Franklin County tends to lead to the back. Trump literally won the state by 10%. Well, Obama did win.
Yes, that is correct. So far, from what we see so far, all the votes are that have come in so far are from Franklin County.
Oh, we have.
Too much for the Democrats.
All right, so what we have so far, these are the some more updated results. Danny O'Connor, the Democrat, who still maintained an easy lead over Troy Morrison. Again, this is early vote. One of the counties so far that has come in was, I believe, I can find that county. Marion and Licking County have also come in at this point. As you can see, we have more results. Again, the margin is apparently starting to close by a little, but again, these are very, very early results.
Yep. Balderson leading and O'Connor leading in one is Fred. primaries. So
Hold on. Just want to update everyone where we're on my side of the feed. Just for a second. In about 8 minutes and 30 seconds, we will have poll closings in the state of Missouri and parts of Michigan and Kansas. So once those polls close, I'll be sure to get those characterizations and any projections of the race once they come in. But again, the Green Party candidate, who some people thought could cause some problems for the Democrat O'Connor, appears to not be. Apparently, is not getting that much share of votes. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, in 8 minutes, we'll get the next poll closing on the East Coast. So I'll be sure to get everyone knows once they come in.
So let's see. Any new results out of? Where's the tab? There it is. Okay. Nope, no new results. Steve O'Connor actually expands on his lead.
updates. We have updates. As you clearly see on the screen right now, Danny O'Connor still maintaining that very early lead with 63% of the vote, 22,387 votes. The Troy Balderson, the Republican, with 36% of the vote with 12,945 votes. Again, very, very early, 0% of the previous early vote. What we have so far appears to be early vote. But again, this is very, very interesting. As you may have saw earlier, we're going to be having poll closings in about 1 minute in the state of Missouri and parts of Michigan and Kansas. So if you haven't already, stay tuned because we're going to be monitoring a lot of these races very closely because these could have significant consequences for how the midterms are going to be. Again, we have 50 seconds until the polls close. Stay tuned. And with about 5 seconds, the polls close. The 8 p.m. poll close. Here are what we have so far. In Missouri, Again, too early to call. No new information at this point. parts of the state have lost.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right. call Michigan.
Something I want to note. Parts of Kansas and Michigan, statewide of Michigan, statewide of Kansas, parts of them closed a few minutes ago. I won't be making any projections of the Michigan and Kansas gubernatorial races and Senate races until all the polls close in those states. So
Yeah,
from time
that
to
makes
time, I'll
sense.
show any votes that have come in, but there won't be any characterization of too early or too close because we want to wait till all the polls have closed.
Okay. Uh, literally run from Maryland.
I want to point out for everyone, we're getting some very, 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 very early results out of the state of Kansas on the Democratic side. Important note: Carl Brewer, very, very little votes, is in third place because of the way I have my setup. Based off polling, I decided it appears that Laura Kelly and Carl Brewer will be the top two vote getters of the night. So as the night goes on, I expect Carl Brewer to be in second place, but as of right now, he's in second. He's in third place. Laura Kelly is in first place, and in third, and it's currently in second place with 34 votes, 33.3%. Joshua Svati. So again, out of all the polls, it shows Laura Kelly and Carl Brewer being the first top two. So I'm predicting that they will be so throughout the night. But this is very, very early. If it turns out that Carl Brewer is not in the top two, I'll make sure to mention that. But again, not all the polls are closed in Kansas, so we're going to wait. But these are so far early results out of Kansas.
Under that,
so
I
you could,
do.
so you could, as you see so far, we have some results in the Kansas House District 4 GOP primary. The incumbent Ron Giestis is maintaining a very lead. It's still crisis as too early to call. We have new results in the Ohio special election. Danny O'Connor, who's still maintaining a steady lead with about 2% of the precincts currently reporting. Again, it says 0.2, but do note that 2% of the precincts are currently in. O'Connor still maintaining a steady lead.
2% are officially in. You are right. And going over to Kansas, but I'm pretty much
We
seeing
have some
O'Connor.
results. We have some results from the Missouri Senate election, and again, similar situation to the Kansas. From the polling and from what I've seen so far, it appeared Peterson and Hawley would be the top two, but as of right now, as it stands, this is currently where it stands. Too early to call Josh Hawley with a very steady lead. Austin Peterson, not even fourth place. He is down below. Again, but so far Josh Hawley with the current lead. Again, 0% Peterson is currently reporting too early to call. All right, we have some very early results. As you just saw, we have some more early results uh, from uh, from uh, Michigan. So far, this is an error. Abdul El Said and Sri Thander's
Ooh, wow.
vote totals are currently actually all this is so far backwards. Abdul El Said is in the lead with 48%. Gretchen Whitmire with the votes in so far is with 46%, and Sri Thander has 10%. I'll try to get those results fixed as soon as I can, but just know as of right now, with the votes we have in so far, Abdul El Said is currently in the lead with 48%. Yes, that's someone pointed out in the chat. There are people still in line. All of Michigan, all the polls in Michigan have not closed. The only reason, that's why you're not seeing any sort of characterization. Uh, that's why you're not seeing any sort of characterization because I would like to wait until all the polls close. So that's why it's not too early, it's not too close. There's no characterization. Once all the polls close in Michigan, which is about in half an hour, I'll be sure to get a characterization on the race when we can. All right, with about 10 minutes until the polls close in all of Kansas and Michigan, you saw right there a bunch of results have come in. It looks to be a tightening race out there in Ohio and some other races. We'll be watching. So stay tuned. 10 minutes. We might be able to make some characterizations in some other races. So stay tuned. In about a minute, we will get the poll closings in Kansas and Michigan, where hopefully we'll be able to make us some projections or updates on any races. So stay tuned. Again, in 1 minute, the polls will close in those states. In 10 seconds, we will have poll closings. And I'll be sure to bring those to you right about now. It is 9 o'clock on the East Coast, and here are where the races currently stand. In Michigan, we project that it's projected to win the Democratic to the right, you'll see John James going up against Sandy Penson. John James is currently in the lead. Going down to the governor's side, in GOP side, he's currently leading in the governor's Democratic primary, Gretchen Whitmer currently leading Laura Kelly currently in the lead over Down with Jeff Williams, the current governor of Kansas, currently leading. Okay. Um, everybody who's currently watching, I thank you all for watching. I thank you all for tuning in. Um, I just got a text about a family emergency right now. I think I'm gonna have to call this early. Um, I want to thank everyone who currently tuned in. I'd like to thank my friend Ethan here. It's been a wonderful conversation here, but so yeah, I apologize I couldn't keep this up, but yeah, I just got an emergency call right now about a family member. I'm gonna be ending the stream here at about I hope so too, Mr. Eddie. I'm gonna be ending things here. It's kind of a bit of a downer. It appears that this will be so far for me the last election night I'm going to be covering this year. Next year, though, I guarantee you, because there will be some special elections as well as the 2019 elections. So when those happen, I'll be sure to cover them. You can follow me on Twitter. It's in the link about any updates on any future election night coverage. But again, I deeply apologize about having to call this early, but thank you to everyone tuned in, and I hope you enjoy the election results. Thank you, everyone.